Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Torcom Talk. I've been looking to do this episode for a long time with one of my mentors and good friends here in Bend, Youri Bujko. Youri is a fascinating human being who is very successful monetarily and within his soul. We ended up having a interview that's not here, so the next clip you're going to see we're in a ridiculous hangar with his ridiculous planes as we talk about life and how he got to where he was, and knowing that that actually isn't the key to this life is having these planes. And so the conversation ranges all over the place. He's here local to Bend, fantastic person to know, and he's taught me so much, and I hope that you guys can pick up a morsel too from our wide-ranging conversation between Youri and myself.
You don't fly because you want to fly.
I don't, or you don't,
No.
or humans don't.
I think you fly because always we wanted to fly.
Yeah.
It's like this one thing that we can go underwater, we can swim, but we can't fly on our own.
Mm-hmm.
So when you can do this in these machines, it's incredibly freeing.
It's super fun. It's super free. And the first time you take off, the first time you land, there's nothing like, well, I was rushing. My hands were sweaty, and I was like wiping it as I was doing my first, I was like the instructor's out of the cockpit. And it
Did
was
you
all
look on the
me.
right seat?
I was on the left seat when I
No,
landed.
but did you look at the right seat?
Oh, no.
I remember taking off, and I'm like, taking off, the plane is rotating, I'm climbing, and I'm not looking in front, I'm looking, holy shit, there is
there's
nobody
there.
here.
Yeah.
Usually there was always, your sight is you're looking at the runway environment, you're looking at the horizon, you're climbing full power, boom, you're doing the whole thing, right? Nobody here. That was like the one missing piece of this whole thing. And I'm like right here, and I remember, and I cried. I was like, oh my gosh. So I go with Southern California, go under Class Bravo, then go by Malibu, obviously, do a little lower than usual flying, the whole deal,
yeah.
right? And the things that they tell you not to do, you do a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A little shy about doing it, but you're doing it nonetheless. And that feeling is amazing.
It is.
And you know what? It's like a symbol of freedom. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Flying.
It is a good symbol of freedom, but it takes a bit to get there, and you've accumulated a couple of very impressive planes behind us. So how has this become? How have you gotten these planes? What's been your key to this? If you were to sum, I know it's a long story that we don't have time for, but
Yeah.
I think I have a good idea of what it is. It's your ability to sell people, your ability to tell people that you know how to get something done.
Yeah. You know what, actually? I was just thinking. I don't sell. I'm of service.
Okay. What does that mean?
My number one objective when I wake up in the morning is to make sure that I help somebody to achieve a better, whatever that better is.
Well, that's doing the right thing.
That's right. And it's like if you think about financial gain for yourself, you come from a very selfish position.
Mm-hmm.
You might make a lot of money, but you will not build wealth. You have to be of service.
What's the difference between making a lot of money and building wealth?
Money is a number. Wealth is like a whole inclusive concept.
Mm-hmm.
Wealth is not only dealing with numbers, but you can be a very rich person, very lonely, not have so many friends. Are you wealthy? No. You're rich, but you're not wealthy.
So your definition of wealth is to have both money and friends?
No.
Okay. So just friends?
Wealth is to be who you really wanted to be, not to be the person that society wanted you to be, not to be the person that your wife wanted you to be, but to be that from the morning to the evening, you've just lived a full life.
How do so many people fall under the habit of wealth means money and they need to do whatever it takes to get that.
Because a society that tells you to do so. And you need to do so. I mean, there's definitely, you have to quantify the energy that you spend.
Mm-hmm.
So you wake up in the morning, you eat X amount of calories, that's energy you're taking in.
Yep.
And then you're going to go through your day and you're going to produce energy. So they have some people that can take a calorie intake, 2,000 or 3,000 calories, and have the mental power to generate this incredible amount of energy. Think about the guy who subsides on hunting in the forest or just plants food to survive.
Mm-hmm.
He puts X amount of energy and he gets pretty much the same amount of energy back. And then he dies. His body becomes energy to the food, and then it's just like the food chain.
Yeah.
Now you have the guy that creates something that has an energetic worth that's much higher than just that survival mode of planting, eating the plant, and then planting again and eating the plant. So wealth goes like this. You can generate that energy, and then at different stages in your life, you're going to do different things with this energy.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, you just want to accumulate things because you've just been looking at society attaching success to
Stuff.
a material label,
Yeah.
right? So you're using this energy to convert it into buying things.
At what point did this switch for you?
Oh, because when
Like,
I came,
at what point did you go from like wealth equals money and all the things to it's deeper than that?
once you have it, you realize, oh my gosh, I got nothing.
Okay.
So once
That's
you have
something-
the thing in your hand, it's like, shit,
I get
this
it.
is not as great as a journey.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I want to climb the top of the mountain. You're at the top of the mountain. Great.
Now what?
The best was the climbing and the suffering. That was the best.
It's the journey, not the destination.
That's right.
So, but I feel like people hear this all the time, but it doesn't get through to them unless they have like a meltdown. That's what it took for me. It took me to have like my wife leaving me and me being like curled up into a ball and realizing that this company that I built up and this team and this wealth, I haven't accumulated the type of wealth or monetary success that you have, but
No, this is just stuff.
But it's a good amount, and I was just sitting and realizing that this doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make me happy at all, and that changed my whole outlook on life and introduced me to like stoicism and philosophy and all these sort of things. So I ended up learning that through a very difficult process that I'm very happy I went through, which was a painful divorce when I was 29. So when you learned it, when you got, basically, it sounds like your point of changing your philosophy of happiness comes from having things to know it's more holistic than that.
Well, no. First of all, for me, so, I was doing the Wall Street thing, having a good time. Then, got caught a little bit into the drug thing. Boom. One day I remember I was at my neighbor's house looking at my ex-wife waiting for me all night. That was the moment. So you rebuild. But that was the moment. The rest is consequential. Anyway, so that's the day.
So she was waiting for you.
Yeah. And then my kid
And
was
you
upstairs.
were out all
and-
night partying?
Yeah, like many nights.
Yeah.
And then you realize, it's like, oh, the shit. So anyway, I went to rehab, got a lot of information through rehab, and decided to live my life to be of service.
Mm-hmm.
And
What does that mean? to you to live your life to be of service?
You know, you have to leave the self out. The ego is what kills people.
It does. Yeah.
The ego is what makes people poor. The ego is what makes people suffer. So, it's amazing that the richest people in the world realize that to be richer, you have to give it all away. So there it is. The secret to an amazing investment life is whatever you got, give it away. Why? Because it goes like this. If you built a fortress with all these walls, all these things, then you spend your time trying to protect the fortress against invasions. You're always trying to control who comes in and out of your fortress. And the fortress becomes your life. So all of a sudden, instead of being creative, that creativity which allowed you to build those walls, all of a sudden you have now a mind that is solely focused on trying to protect what you've built.
Instead of thinking...
That's the journey thing. All of a sudden you don't get good returns. Why? Because the fortress is there standing. It's not growing. It's not a forest. You don't have trees. You don't have resources that you exploit, that you set as fortress. So you spend your life protecting that fortress. If you get rid of the fortress, you get your backpack and go, well, now you've learned all these things. You go back and you see a new opportunity. And then you do this over and over and over again. And so you do it with, like you went through a divorce. No, you share the path with your ex-wife. But it's just a journey. You were not meant to be together. However, you're still together in some ways.
Yeah, we're partners still. Yeah.
Plus, she helped you get to a certain stage, and you helped her get to a certain stage.
Yeah.
So you didn't spend your energy trying to defend something that was not meant to be. So you're both growing.
That's true. In the beginning, I was all about, I'm going to take this from her. I'm going to kick her out of my fortress. It's basically my mentality when she left me. And then I realized that we built that together and why. But now I need to change my perception on, and this has been something I'm trying to battle with. Like, I say this, that I'm okay with this big sign, our big Mazama logo over our building, that I'm okay with a day where that gets removed against my will. I don't know if I really am, but I try to picture that happening because that's where all my anxiety stems from when I see like a client that's not happy with us, and if they cancel, which doesn't happen often, but it does happen, the tailspin that I used to really let myself go into is like, oh, that's gonna happen, and another one, and we're gonna lose people, and then all of a sudden the sign's coming down, and then I'm done.
That's the best thing that can happen, is all of a sudden your worry is no longer there, because then you can find the bud that got you there again. And that's what happens, is we lose each other into doing these things that have absolutely no end.
And they end up being a slave to you too, because if you think that you have to sign certain clients in order to keep things going, and if you have to do that, then all of a sudden you're making calls due to, and this is how I used to make calls, it's not anymore, I'd make calls due to keeping the business growing as opposed to working with people that I know are a good fit for our company. So what you're breathing, you have a pulse, you have money, you're in. Now, that's not the case, because I know I learned the hard way what that does to the morale of the team that I really care about compared to the zeros in the bank account of the business. It's way, way more important and fulfilling to have like your team jacked and happy to be working with people and not have that asshole who is trying to protect his workers, who is yelling and making my team cry, which has happened in the past. I had to fire a few clients, but I would still find the trap of, well, we need to pay for the health, we need to pay for this, we need to pay for that, so they're coming on. But it's not worth it.
That's right.
It's not.
That's right.
How, you've taught me a lot of things over the years. Definitely like one of my, definitely my best mentor in town here and friend.
Well,
when it comes to so many things that you've taught, and I was just like, man, this podcast, there's so many things that I would love to have you share with people that has gone far from me. One of them is your ability on what you taught me. I always prided myself on my ability of getting new business through selling and stuff like that, but I'm always open to learning, and what you taught me has worked incredibly well. But I would like to just have you take it from there. Like, how are your tactics on getting somebody to open up to you? Somebody who could be a potential client.
Well, everybody can be a potential client.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I'm not looking for real business. I'm looking for, it's like an exchange of energy. So, the client will teach you things which will allow you to refine your craft, will come up with needs and issues which will require you to actually do research in your field that you know very well, but will challenge your knowledge. And you got to find a way. And because you wake up to be of service,
mm-hmm.
It's not, I'm just going to do the cookie cutter solution. You're just going to buy A, B, C investment. You're going to do this, great. Then I'm going to get X amount of commissions. No. That's not what you invest for. First of all, you have to try to read the person and try to understand the challenge that person is going through, because there are two people that come to you. The person comes to you telling you who they are. But it's not the person you invest for. Your challenge is to know who that person really is, but that person doesn't know yet who that person is.
Yeah.
But from an investment perspective, it's very important that you know. Why? Because if that person does not invest for the person that person really is, at some point in time, it will fall short. Okay? So, example, you get a couple that comes to you. So, well, to go back to your question is, if you want to be of service and you feel that these people need help, the sale is there. It will happen. It's organic. There is a need for food, and you provide the food. The person is hungry. Boom, it'll be a match.
How do you get them to open up, though?
It's energetic. It's like it's almost esoteric. You look at them in the eyes. First of all, you listen. They have something to say.
Let's talk about that, listening. Because so many reps come in and they just talk.
Well, you have to kind of give you like your elevator pitch.
Sure.
And people tell you, no, I'm not interested. And then, I don't know, it's you gauge at that point.
What do you hear when somebody tells you they're not interested? In life, not just in investing and stuff like that, just in life and whenever you're trying to persevere through.
Well, they might actually not be interested. I mean, that's what I hear.
I hear try again.
Yeah. The reality is, in 60 seconds, you're not going to know what that person feels, but you can read. You can read the energy. When they tell you I'm not interested, you observe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, we're back to, animal kind of reactions here. You just read. Is that person crying for help?
Mm-hmm.
Is that person ego's talking? Who is talking here? There are two things in the sales process. So you can throw, arrows all over and try to see, who got hit and try to see if you have a kill, right? Or you target your market and you know that people have a certain need. So at the beginning, and you and I have this in common, is we cold call for a living. I cold call out of the phone book,
right?
And I call every number.
Mm-hmm.
And the game goes like this. You speak to 100 people, one will say yes, and for 10 yes, you have one client. These are numbers. It's mathematic. All you have to do is hit the dials, right?
Mm-hmm.
It works. Because if you keep asking, somebody will have a need at some point in time, and you just happen to be asking.
Yeah, and they say things like, oh, you caught me at the right time.
That's right. So the more you dial, the more successful you are, no exception to the rule.
2019, people don't like cold calling. They're like, oh, no, I'll just be doing this stuff like socially, or I'll send out a bunch of emails and stuff like that. But I mean, Mitch, who's been getting into sales here, because he's like, but I want to learn how to sell. I'm like, all right, pick up the phone. And he's been having great success. And he's been hearing the things like, haven't you, Mitch, oh, you caught me at the right time. And you've also been hearing no's. So why don't people want to do it? And why is it like, where did this start? Where do you think? And how do you change somebody who's young and hungry to not be afraid of picking up the phone?
It's ego.
It's the ego.
It's the ego.
It's the ego of being
Remember,
said no to.
Oh, they have shitty lives. They're stressed. They pretend. So they show up in a sales job and they're not doing the things that you need to do to sell, but they want the results of the sale. So the ego is saying, I'm bigger than this. No. If you sell, you try to talk to as many people as you can so that you can find somebody who has a need for your services. And it doesn't mean that you're like a predator. It means you want to be of service.
Yeah.
It's like, the Salvation Army people. They go in all day and they ring the bell. And not everybody gives. But what they want is to help the needy. And they go out there and they will solicit everybody for that coin. It's not about the soliciting. They have a higher purpose. The higher purpose is to go help someone else. So when you go and sell, you have a service that will change someone's life. It will absolutely change someone's life. But you need to find a contra to that trade. And that's what you're looking for. So you're going to look at as many people as you can. And the good news is once you find a client, not only do you find a client, but you find a partner. You might meet a wife. You might meet a friend. You will for sure meet a mentor, because when you get a client, that person has been successful or is about to be successful. Like, you're my client. Well, you're building success. I learned so much from you. You're bringing a dimension which I no longer have because of the age difference. You also come from a different generation. So I observe the way that you process information, the way you live. So it is actually a mutually beneficial relationship. Okay, we're doing this because that's what you know, and I can help you on the other side once you have accumulated the numbers, because I'm very good with numbers and you're very good with this.
Sure.
So you go out there and you call as many people as you can so that you can find as many people you can be of service to, because the more you help, the better you feel. And the less selfish you are. If you only have 1 or 2 clients, all you think is about your poor ass, you can't pay the bill. That's selfish. If you have 1,000 clients, you're so busy helping, you don't have time to pay your bills. In fact, most of these guys, you know what? They have like a normal car and they live in a normal house. They're too busy to think about themselves. And that's the person I want to be, is to be of service to others, to help, and everybody succeeds here.
Is that kind of like the reason why? I mean, you have some awesome planes here, obviously, but you have like a 1995 Suburban outside.
I hate cars.
Yeah.
You can't drive.
Yeah. So.
Well, the cops are here with a gun, shooting your speed, whatever, on the road. If you don't go 20 miles an hour, all of a sudden it's $150. I hate that $150.
So you go in a slow.
No, plus when you're my height, 6'6", you could not give me a Ferrari. I would not drive it.
Yeah.
I would trade it for a Ford Transit or like a Mercedes Sprinter or something big. It's like, what the fuck did I do with that?
Yeah, you want to fit well in it.
Yeah. No.
So going back to the sale really quick, how can we help people get over no? Because that's what they're afraid of, right? Their ego and being said no to.
Nothing you can do. They have to go through a lot of no's to get the tough skin, to know that there's a yes coming. Is that yes? Well, I'll tell you what happens. So they get the yes, and then they forget how they got the yes. That's the ego comes back. So you go in, you hustle, you suffer, you get the yes. Now you have a business. Now you feel good. And then your ego comes in. Ooh. Aren't you so good now? You're not going to go back to begging for money, are you? You're not going to go back to begging for business. First of all, you were not begging for business. You were looking for people to help. And that's the first thing people forget. And then second is, I got my commission check. And the me comes in, ego. And then they just don't want to go back to what really got them there in the first place. So they have to go through many, many, many yeses. And then to understand that it's just a process. And once they can, it's like flying instrument, If you let your brain, if you let your eyes, if you let your senses guide you, you're going to die real fast.
Instrument on a plane.
Like this.
Yeah.
You're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go in the clouds, and within 20 to 30 seconds, you're done.
Yeah. Basically what happens when you go into a cloud, your senses completely don't understand which way is up and which way is down.
That's right.
Pretty much immediately for those that don't fly. And it seems like, well, what are you talking about? I know which way is up, I know which way is down. You don't once you go into a cloud. And you might be thinking that your brain, your feelings might be feeling like you're going into a dive, and so that you need to pull up, but really you were going up and you just pulled into a stall, or the opposite. And that's one.
Yeah, bad things happen. Mm-hmm. So if you train and do it enough times, you just read the gauges and you're like, oh yeah. And then you realize it's all an approximation. It is so easy.
Yeah, that's what happens when I fly with you. Is you basically, I remember the first time I was flying you in the King Air, and after you had everything set up, you're like, okay, and took the shields, the aluminum shields for the windows, and blocked them all off to save it. And I was just like,
because it was so hot in that cockpit.
But you don't need to look outside.
Yeah. So what happens is, flying is actually an extremely amazing skill to pick up, because it will help you in every aspect of life, especially in sales, by the way.
Oh, how in sales?
It's hard work. It's a lot of study. You have to know your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And once you know the theory, so it's in the book, you can answer the quiz, done. Then there's nothing replaces practice. Mm-hmm. You have to do it over and over and over again. And then guess what? You're bad. No, first of all, you're real bad, then not so bad, then you're fair, then you're good, and then you're current.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and how do you stay current? By doing. If you stop doing, you're real bad, then you're bad. And
it's like a language.
Yeah. So you have to keep doing and doing and doing and doing. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do it well, you die.
Yeah.
Same in sales. If you are not current, you're not going to sell, so you're going to lose your job, because your boss is going to fire you, or you're going to lose money to your client. It's just something will give.
Yeah.
You have to stay current. And by
current, you mean, I'm in this analogy, you're talking about cold calling, stay current, and don't let your ego
calling, going to meetings,
referrals,
going to events,
whatever
you have to do. You have to speak to new people. That's what you have to do.
Absolutely.
And that's the currency. And you know what? And again, you talk to people to be of service. You don't talk to people. If you just look at the self, what happens is, you might actually get very wealthy very quick, very rich very quickly, but because the ego will come in, and if the ego, if you let the ego take over, it goes down very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
The first hiccup in business, you don't want to lose things. So all of a sudden, the ego tells you do this, you do bad things, and you're out of business. So every time you have a business failure, is because you let the ego speak.
Right.
And by the way, failure is only an interpretation of what has happened. If a business fails, or a transaction fails, or you didn't get the business, it's just part of the process.
It's like good and bad are just interpretations of the mind.
That's right.
Things aren't good, things aren't bad. It's your perception of them.
That's
That's it. So once you start thinking, oh, this is a real bad deal, that's only because you think that.
That's right.
Like the thought of Malcolm X when he was thrown into jail, he's just like, oh, what an opportunity for me to learn law and read. I don't have to do anything else. I could just end up studying philosophy and law and end up doing the great civil rights movement that he ended up doing. That just came from, this isn't a bad thing. This is actually a good thing. Look at all this free time I now have.
That's right.
Can you imagine if you got thrown into jail, all the things you could learn?
Well, I was thinking, then I don't have to do this trash chore, then I don't have to do that chore. Hospitals are good too, because you have the nurses to help you to get fed. It's kind of nice too, but anyway, that aside.
with another thing I like when it comes to what you're talking about with being a service when it comes to getting new clients, and that's something that I've learned. I used to have, it worked, but have like a pitch and a product that was kind of on rails as far as what we can do. But we've diversified so much that it's just like I come in and I end up just asking a lot of questions. Like, what are you looking to do? How are you doing it? What's the pain points that you're having? What have you marketed before? Have you thought about dropping the price on this? Have you thought about increasing that? What about X? What about Y? What about Z? And the whole presentation is actually just a ton of questions going deep, 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 and they end up giving me all these things that are happening and how I can end up helping them. And then just putting together, okay, can I help? And if I can, this is how, because I now know everything that you're trying to accomplish, the failures you've gone through, and the successes you have, and how we can replicate that and what we can learn from the failures before, and as opposed to when they come and be like, this is the system, here's the funnel, this is how you get the leads, sign right there. And they would, but I wouldn't have a full understanding to be of service. I'd be able to get the check, but I wouldn't be able to have as high of a retention as I do now and as happy of clients because I wouldn't fully understand. So not only do I have a higher retention rate.
That's currency.
Currency. Oh, being like current as a pilot.
You have to start with a product.
Mm-hmm.
And you build the rapport from that product. And even with new clients at your stage, it might be the one product that gets you there. But what happens is now your experience is the reading into what the person needs, and that person doesn't understand yet that they need what you know they need.
But you can help walk them through it.
That's right.
By asking questions. It's
But at the beginning,
the Socratic method, so to speak.
At the beginning, you have to attract them onto one thing.
What's that?
Whatever product you're selling.
Yeah.
You have the one thing so that you can get this initial meeting, or you can get this initial contract. And then, if you have good intentions, the rest comes in. And, as you do it so many times with so many people, then all of a sudden you have a certain fluency on their businesses, their needs, and you know what they don't know because they're like there. You have a synoptic view about what's being done right now to get their business to the 21st century.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's kind of interesting. I was going through this I was teaching Mitch this the other day. I accidentally have taught myself to become a better salesperson by switching up my reading. So I used to be, when I was at Money Hungry, going to make $100 million agency and that's all that matters. And now like that, I know that that's not what matters. And so it went from my reading would be just all these sales books, like how to become better at sales, how to run an awesome business, stuff like that. And that would just be like the nightstand was full of those kind of books. And now the books have shifted. I occasionally go back to those, not too often, but the books have more shifted to Stoicism, philosophy, and a big thing that I'm tackling is Plato. And Plato is all on Socrates, and Socrates' method is just asking questions and listening, active listening like you were talking about. And from studying that so much, I just find myself doing it in meetings with potential clients, and that leads to like all of this, and I'm like, I can help you so much more. And the thing that's crazy is I oftentimes don't even have the solution for them right away. And I even tell them, like, I'm not quite sure what's exactly going to be the right thing here, but here's a combination we work at to tackle these problems that you have. Does that seem right? And they're like, yeah.
I'm gonna interrupt you here, but this is when you are an amazing business person, is all of a sudden the solution is gonna come from that team that you've built with that client who's no longer a client, is a partner.
Yeah.
You know certain things, he knows other things, and the combination of 1 + 1 = 5. Yeah. That synergy will allow you to brainstorm, and the solution that's being created is going to come from that partnership. So your client is not your client. Your client is your partner, and you're taking that knowledge to the next one and the next one and the next one. That's why your job is to get as many clients as you can so you can become exponentially better at what you do. The more clients you have, the less repetitive you are, the more you have to learn to adjust, to transform yourself and themselves. And then all of a sudden, it's like the economy of scale. You have all of this experience that you can tackle. And to help John here, you call Peter, who is also your client, said, look, John's got this going on. And I mean, I was thinking about it yesterday, but you know better because this is your field of expertise. How can we help him? Because he's stuck here.
Yeah.
Like you're expanding in the UK, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the UK, they have a UK way to do business. We have a US way to do business. You know, Europe is kind of always behind. They don't know yet that they need what you are bringing to them. Well, so you're going to get one guy who is going to understand, and then the next guy, and the next guy, but they have really geographically, I mean, they have very local problems.
Mm-hmm.
The more you have, the more you learn, the more you can help. But you can help them to begin with because you're bringing this completely different approach, or, you know, that's being done here because, I mean, you know, the US is still in the forefront of business. So you're bringing this knowledge to them. And then what happens is they're going to also bring you that UK culture so that you actually can help them in their way.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you don't have clients, you have partners. The reality of the matter is your business is going to be better and better and better because you're going to invent things. You're going to become creative. And in today's environment where everything is commoditized, you can always find cheaper. So either you become extremely creative and irreplaceable, otherwise they'll replace. I mean, this is a fact of life.
Going really quick, so what you're saying on the culture, I wanted to hit on that for a second really quick. So you're French, and how many languages do you speak?
Couple.
2?
French and English. I dabble a little here, a little there, but...
Okay, so just in, that's twice as many as the average American, twice as many as I do. I'm trying to learn Spanish more, but... You don't get to practice. I don't get to practice it too much because we live in Bend and there's not really much to practice with. But anyway, my question is, how do you end up seeing the world differently when you're speaking? Do you see the world differently through different languages?
Of course.
Okay, that's
well. I mean, from the cultural standpoint, yes, and through the language, obviously.
Yeah. Can you like elaborate on that? Why? How are things different in a language compared to English, or compared to
that's
this
my
one?
wife because sometimes we just don't understand each other. Because I say one thing and she understands another thing, being Brazilian. So obviously we have, you know, French to English to Portuguese. So it's just like things get lost in translation. And I think, well, like for example, to describe food, you have so many words in French and you have like 3 words in English. So right there.
Really?
To describe your experience when it comes to food or the experience of food or this or that, you're missing certain things.
So there is no word for like how I'm trying to describe this.
No, there's always an equivalent, but it doesn't have the subtleties that the French language will have just because the French are, you know, paying attention to this. And the same in mathematics, French seems to be a better language. However, if you think about technical stuff, English is way superior. It's more direct, more concise, and with 2 words you describe the whole issue. So, you know.
Yeah, the reason because I'm fascinated with like that concept with, for example, like Mandarin has a word for, you know how we're always like, especially in today's society, being like, oh, it's a he or she or, you know, whatever, or that whole thing, what do you say? And when authors are writing books, is like, I decided to go with he. They like their forewords are often talking about, I decided to just go with she the whole time, but I do mean he or she. But Mandarin, they have a word for just a person, and we don't have that equivalent like an it, so to speak. And so that whole perception of being like the one, and why do you even put a gender to it? Because you and I, we can go off and do a lot of things, and it doesn't matter what's in between like our legs. We're still that Mandarin word. And so that just fascinates me. Like, okay, well then you start seeing the world through a different perspective, and something that we can't even comprehend, and we have to write forwards on how to describe it in the beginning of a book. So in France, when you guys are dealing with like different descriptions of food and things like that, do you Do you find that ends up helping as well in like business when you're talking? Do you have like clients in Europe that?
Well, for sure. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm in the money business. So my job is to invest. The one thing I don't want to hear on an initial, I mean, you have the initial sales call. Yes, let's go for a meeting. I don't care about what they have. I don't care about what they have achieved. I need to gauge the person, where the person is, what the person does, how the person thinks. I just want to get a qualitative approach to the person as a person. A lunch is an amazing thing. I mean, you get so much out of going to lunch with somebody, the way they look at food and the way they take the time, or they don't have the time, and then you can gauge them as a person. Because, to help somebody, you have to gauge that somebody. But you don't talk about, I'm going to help you on the first meeting. It's like, first get to know who the person is. Then the second meeting.
At lunch, really quick, when you meet with people, what are some things that make you abort?
Abort?
Abort from wanting to work with that person, because lunch
Cell
is very
phone.
telling.
If they're busy on the cell phone, fuck it, I'm done.
Okay.
End of story.
Yeah.
I'm gone. If they're I'm here, I'm present, we're having a great moment. If they're like always looking down, so busy, they're not in that moment, I'm not going to be able to help, because it's going to get hard to help somebody with okay.
Do you bring that up first? Because so many people have this problem.
Well, but I need attention, because, I deal with financial stuff. I know things that the wives don't know, or the husbands don't know.
Yeah.
I know things that will happen in the future that they don't even know is going to happen in the future. You work with this energy that's like, could be the brightest energy, but it's also very often dark energy, okay? It's going to get tough sometimes. I need attention. If they cannot give me this attention at lunch, if we don't, and I'm not just a guy who provides a service. I need to know that we have this connection, because it's going to get hard sometimes. And I'm going to need to do things for people for who they really are, not the people that they're advertising the world they are. So if you go to lunch and they don't give you the time of day, or they're too busy, they're not interested. I can't make that connection. I won't be able to help. I can get a buck out of them. Great, sell a couple investments, get them for 2-3 years. But that's not what I do. What I do is help people make sure that they're protected against themselves, against inflation, that they have maximized the return on their energy that they produce. So, because you have that much energy, you're going to produce through your lifetime. And that's it. At one point, you can't, start, you're able to work, and one point you're not able to work. Well, who's taking care of you?
Yeah, and I'm with you. So actually, when I was vomiting my fucking ass off.
You have an iPhone now. Let me see. This is a
No, we're not talking about the iPhone.
Okay.
Well, we'll talk. Well, yeah, we are talking. We're not going to get into the specs of that. Yeah, I did. That's a long story.
Well, I know the story.
But anyway, not this phone. It was a Droid, but in Vegas, I was.
Did you see? Okay.
Yeah, it came in. I got so sick from eating raw fish for the first time in 2.5 years. I had to go to the hospital, and I was vomiting for 18 hours straight. And this thing, it was just a normal Tuesday, and I'm in the hospital, and it's like 1 o'clock, and this thing's just doing what it normally does, which I'm used to, which is clients, employees, friends, mom, and I have no interest of dealing with that thing, because I'm worried about taking care of my body, and my body is not doing good at all. And I just, for that moment, hated that thing's existence. And now I'm back to normal and everything like that, but I don't like having it out in person and stuff like that. And I don't like when we go to lunch, when we we both are in the moment, and I really appreciate that. But the problem that what you're saying on something that's a complete off is I would probably have to cut half my clients if I followed that philosophy.
Well, you take into consideration, doesn't mean that you cut. It means that you're going to have to do some work there. Set up a context where you can actually relate with the person so you can help. So you look at the situation, you assess the situation, you realize that person is distracted. Well, maybe we go biking. Maybe we go get drunk. Something.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to do something to
Yeah.
get that person distracted from this. So you're going to have to bring another distraction because your job is to help. The only way you help is if you know that true person.
Sure.
You have to help because you don't start this relationship unless you can make a difference in that person's life. And the people are too busy to be distracted and they're not paying enough attention, well, they're going to hurt themselves. Like, again, analogy to flying. If you're not paying attention, you look up and oops, you're where you don't want to be. If you don't plan it, well, it's lethal in airplanes. And it's actually lethal in life. And people don't understand this whole thing. They think life is great, no problems, careless. If you don't plan well, you will die. If you don't eat well, you will die. If you don't plan financially, you will not have a good life. These are real things. And people are super distracted at the moment, and they're not paying attention to details. And big changes is from an accumulation of small details. People don't give a fuck right now? Okay. And guess they wake up and they're like, oh my gosh, what happened to me? Well, what happened to you is you were not paying attention.
Yeah.
And in conversation, they were not paying attention. At the end of the conversation, it compounds. They have no clue about what was said or what was done. No fucking clue. Because you know what? If you keep missing 2 seconds every 2 minutes, at the end of 3 hours, it's a lot of seconds. You might have missed a critical piece of information.
Yeah, and one thing that you're just talking about when it comes to eating and not planning on when it comes to like wealth and stuff like that is there's something that's fascinating that I was actually a victim of, and something that is just a lack of education to my generation. But we're not taught we're not taught to even open up 401ks and IRAs. And Roth IRAs.
Well, that's a parent's fault, maybe.
Parents, school, whatever you want to do, that value isn't there. So I ended up like getting my stuff together at the age of like 32, just thinking to myself, I don't like to live in the past, so I only kicked myself once.
By the way, we need to have that conversation. That's after all of this.
Yeah.
We need to go upstairs and talk about this.
But I wish I learned that lesson when I was 18. Wish I was putting just $100. Even if it was $100 every 3 months, like $30 a month, that would have been so much bigger because of compound interest. And just 10% on top of itself every tax, it's insane. But this never was told me how important it was.
Yeah.
And so
I think it's because
I'm not alone on that. I have plenty.
I think what happens is, I think it's a generation that takes for granted that, the lights
are on.
The food is there. There's just,
it's a good time to be alive when it comes to not going through a shitstorm. There's no war that we have to be drafted to. Wars, that we have to be drafted to in America.
Yeah. You assume that it's, by the way, your generation is a lot more intelligent than, every generation gets more and more intelligent, but more and more focused. When it comes to investments, education, just, people are not necessarily interested in doing financial planning or investments or what have you, because it just was provided. They just never have to think about it. My generation was different from my parents' generation, from their parents' generation. Obviously, World War I, World War II, and then Vietnam and all of this. These were pretty chaotic times, so you have to kind of think about the future. And nothing was given, but the next generation is, you take everything for granted. But it's good and bad. I mean, your generation is going to create more wealth than the previous generation. It's just going to be a different kind of wealth. What happens is, at this particular conjuncture, people assume that they will be taken care of because the parents were taking care of them.
Yeah.
The system is not going to take care of anybody, and the parents might or might not, or they might inherit. But what happens is most of them are highly unprepared, and they're going to lose it all.
And the urgency of investing is not communicated to us. It's not spelled out. Nobody ever spelled it out to me that if you just put aside a few $1,000s a year that you're going to end up spending on stupid crap like an updated iPhone anyway, and you let that compound over the course of 10 years, it's going to be ridiculous amount fold. You know better than me. Like what would,
power of compounding is tremendous.
yeah. So since this is your world, I'm not going to try to say what's going to be. What would happen to somebody if they were investing like $1,000 when they're 20? How big do you think that would be when they're 50?
It depends. I mean, if you had bought Apple, you'd be a multi-zillionaire.
I mean, just in Roth IRA.
I don't know. I would
index
have to run the number. The numbers are staggering. I mean,
it goes like this, though.
Yeah, it's exponential.
Yeah,
it's exponential. It's crazy. I mean, that's why people have so much wealth in their houses, is because it's for saving. You buy the asset, you own the asset, and then you're making monthly contribution, of which a tiny portion goes towards the asset. Most of it goes to the bank in form of interest.
Mm-hmm.
If you actually took most of that money that you give in a mortgage and live in a shitty apartment, you'd be like Warren Buffett, because most of your mortgage. So let's say you put $100,000 down, you buy this asset, right? And then your interest is 5-6%. So a portion of your monthly payment is interest and a portion is principal. Well, that tiny portion of principal compounded over 20, 30 years become millions.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you had taken that mortgage and took half, so lived just slightly beyond the level that you wanted to live for 10 years. All of a sudden, you're going from your studio to your mansion.
Right.
There you go.
But what's the point of, like, even when you'd go, like if you're like, okay, but I want the bigger house now. Okay, cool. You got yourself a 3-bedroom
let me
for
give
what?
The wake-up call. We had a big house. All I want is a studio. Like you saw my house, I just want to make a studio upstairs, and downstairs is just because downstairs is below upstairs. I'm living upstairs. The bigger, the more pain in the, you know what it is.
It's just a bunch of empty rooms.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's the ego.
Of
the
course.
ego is your worst. It's your best friend and your worst enemy.
The ego's created a $1 trillion industry of people that are just storing their ego shit, their stuff, and it's in storage. Yeah, I'm talking about storage. Freaking close to $1 trillion on just, we ran out of places to put our crap, but we can't get rid of it because we own it, so we need to pay to store it somewhere. How crazy is that?
Well, there's, by the way, your generation.
I don't do that shit.
Your generation is going to transform a lot of things, because people will, it's capitalism and communism are merging. All of a sudden you realize you can rent something, you can share. No, but I mean, it's the truth.
I know.
People will share resources. We just don't have enough resources. So, there's a lot of transformations that are happening that your generation is bringing. It's just missing a slight level of little amount of education to take advantage of some of these changes from an investment standpoint. So instead of being a consumer, so if you own an iPhone, well, since you consume so much of that iPhone, why don't you buy a couple of shares of Apple and ride them along? Since you're using Facebook all the time, maybe my suggestion is, why don't you buy 50 shares of Facebook to begin with, and whatever you use every single day, oh, you have Ubiquiti router, great, buy Ubiquiti stock. This thing went up, 200-300%. Apple went up, you know how much it went up. So the reality is, it's just a mindset. As you consume, also become an investor. Since you're already consuming, spending money on the iPhone, well, skip one iPhone and buy some shares. So next thing you know is the shares that you bought in lieu of that newest iPhone will pay for an iPhone the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a mindset. That's what I'm trying to do with at least people your age, is to try to come up with I'm trying to do. I know what needs to be done. I just don't know how to get it done, except that by building this rapport and understanding how you proceed, how you think, because obviously we have a 20-year difference. So it's a difference in generation.
Yeah.
Right? But I understand how you consume, I understand how you see things, and my job to be able to be of service is to help you using your background and knowledge. We merge the two, and then we both grow from me learning about you and vice versa. And then you know about my craft. So
what have been like some of your big plays that have helped you build the monetary success that you've achieved in your life?
Yeah, nothing really big. It's just systematic compounding of consistent interest. It's hard because you have some great winners, you have some great losers over time. Statistics work in your favor. You really don't have to be a genius. You just have to be extremely consistently mediocre, and you will achieve great success. I mean, that's it. It's like a sales guy. Consistent, mediocre sales, and over time it compounds. And next thing you know is you have a huge business.
True.
You know, you don't want to be up and down, up and down, up and down, pick up a side. No. I'm doing the French thing. Let's see who is going to win, then I pick up a side. So, not knowing, I pick everybody's side, and over time, you know, you start to get, the odds are in your favor. You know, it's amazing. In investments, the odds are in your favor. The hardest, it's like doing bungee jumping. You have to jump. The hardest thing is the jump. That's it. In investments, it's the same. You get going, it's on cruise control. One day you wake up, oh my gosh, I got this much. Yeah, but how did I do this? 4.5% a year. Imagine if it was 6% or 10%. People wake up. The power of compounding is crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And that's the thing that we should, Mitch, overlay some like graphs of the power of compounding.
Yeah, I wish
as
we
we're
had.
talking.
You know
We'll do it in post. We'll have like a bunch of graphs like showing like, hey, here's like $1,000 here, and this is what would happen in 30 years if you put it in a Roth.
Well, I mean, like for example, you buy a car, $40,000 on a loan. Buy a $500 car, and spend the money you get from point A to point B, same place. So instead of buying the super,
But that's your ego chariot.
Well, no, but you need maybe. That's right. That's right. That's right.
That's my new favorite term for like really expensive cars is your ego chariot.
You know, it's nice to have an ego chariot too sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
But in today's world, I mean, you know, whatever.
I wanted to go back really quick. I was curious. So when I was asking you on when you go to a meal, and you and I asked what was the number one thing that's just like, oh, I don't want to work with this person. That's if they're on their phone the whole time. So that's a new advancement over the last 20 years, right? And I don't know a world
that has created massive amount of wealth, because that technology, if you were to buy into that technology, you would be a very wealthy man.
Yes, I agree.
I'm just correlating.
Yeah.
The good to the bad.
But I'm curious as to what would be that sign before the phone, and maybe still today, probably still today. What's another thing? Like if you saw somebody doing this while meeting you.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. Well, you know, they don't ask necessarily the questions. They're just talking a lot about, well, you know, people like to talk about themselves, which is fine. But you realize that they're actually trying to justify the hollowness that is. So they're just presenting you the person they want the world to perceive they are. Right there, you know that they're not for real. So unless you can crack that nut and tell them, I know who you are, it's fine, you will get there. You're not there today, but let me show you the power of compounding, and in 12 years you're there. So we're going to do this, you and I together. I won't tell anybody. Go do your thing. I'm going to help you there. We meet in 12 years, and this is your financial plan. If you know, that's your job. So, you know, they talk a lot about themselves. They're justifying something that is unjustifiable, and there's just nothing there. They just don't have the desire or the means or a combination thereof.
Who was it? I think it might have been Schwab. I'm not entirely sure, but some successful CEO, he would do a test where he would take a person who's interviewing for a higher up position at his company to breakfast, and he would tell the waitress to purposely screw up his order, to see how he would react. And you could tell a lot from a person, just like how they treat people and humans and how they are, just by like getting really upset that the eggs aren't over easy or whatever it was. And from that reaction would be like one of the main things that would bring him. I haven't done it. I've always thought about doing that. I think
I would be bad because, you know, I'm expecting the meal to come as advertised. So I have a low tolerance for the whole experience. Tell you, I mean, you know how I like to eat, and I just go above and beyond to make sure that experience is there. And it's like, it drives me nuts in restaurants where you're expected, you know, when you're expected to be okay with mediocrity. It's just
What's the thing that you say when we go out to eat? You say something to waitresses towards the end of our meal when they're trying to still working or something like that.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
are you still working on this? I'm not working, I'm eating. You're working, I'm eating. Eating is no work. What? This is it drives me nuts.
Yeah, I know.
I am not working. I'm having an amazing time. We're exchanging energy. It's beautiful. Are you still working on this? Oh, then you turn this and there's no plate. It's like gone. But that's the French culture, by the way. So certain things that I think are not okay are very okay culturally in the U.S.
Well, American culture and the French culture and Italian, a lot of European cultures is like the eating is a whole like 3-hour, sometimes more, like symphony of food and pleasure and fun and wine.
You receive energy. It's energy.
Yeah.
You have this opportunity to play with energy, to get the sun, to provide that meal, to get re-energized. Then you
Yeah.
have the opportunity to relate with people, to get this human energy. So when you go for a meal, you're there to re-energize. It is not a chore. It is not work. You're re-energizing. You're getting all of this, things. Then you can go out there and do your thing. It's an amazing thing.
And European culture has that down to the point where when I'm in Italy, and I'm like, okay, we're ready to go. Can I get the check? That's not normal. Because I'm so used to an American culture, them being like, are you still working? Are you still working? How do I get you out of here so I get the most amount of people in and out of my restaurant? I wonder why that is. Why like Italian restaurants and French restaurants don't have that same desire, because they would make more money. I guess just the culture is really, I think it's don't get me wrong, it's a good thing, but
Charge more.
yeah.
I mean, charge more for the meal. Cheap food is cheap food because it's cheap, because you don't get the service. If you go to a very fancy restaurant, $50 for your plate, for your main course, is not $50 for the meat or the whatever you're having. Is $50 for the experience.
Right.
So your meal costs you $500 for 2 people. Well, I guarantee you're not in and out in 45 minutes. It's going to be 2.5 to 3 hours, which is, by the way, your cycle of digestion. Surprisingly, you come out of there, you're feeling fantastic. That's right. But to get $4.95 plate, well, you have to eat in 15 minutes.
What do you think is your most gifted book to people?
Yeah, I have no idea. There's so many I like.
What's one you really like?
You asked me that before, and I don't have one that I can pinpoint. Truly.
Yeah, you have a freaking ton of beautiful books in your office.
I know,
back
and
there.
it's like I get one sentence of each, and what's amazing is like, well, yeah, actually no, my favorite book of all time is Dune.
Dune?
Yeah,
I haven't
science
read it.
fiction.
Yeah.
Frank Herbert. It's the most incredible. In fact, it's so actual today, with everything that's going on, the changes and environment, and it's not only a great story, it's great science fiction, but incredible philosophy. It gives you a perspective. Obviously there's some special power, there's some religious aspects, spiritual things, environmental things, but it's a story about how humans, or they're not humans in this particular situation, but how people survive, thrive, and then lose it all and transform and born again. It's very interesting. And then it's intergenerational. The series goes many books, but very interesting. Yeah.
How do you see it applying? When do you think the book was written?
Well, early 50s.
Okay.
I want to check on this. I have to do, because I don't want to say something stupid. No, it's actually later. Hold on one second.
Mitch, what do you think? Can you look at it? Or you don't have internet, do you? We're off site.
I knew that information, but hold on.
Mitch, can you look at
1965.
Okay, so 65. So what are the I haven't read the book, so I'm curious. What are the things that you're seeing happen today from
The environment. Well, it's a desert planet,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just transforming this planet into a desert planet eventually. So, well, this is science fiction about a planet that's a desert that they want to make it into paradise, and we're in paradise and we're making it into that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then how there are these giant worms, and these giant worms create this very precious commodity called the spice, and correlate to what commodities we have. Might it be oil, wood, or whatever wealth. What happens is the land creates the wealth.
Mhm.
If you kill the land, you kill the wealth.
Weird. Wrong
Yep.
concept.
Well, it's what it is. So, we kill the land, we kill the wealth.
That's true. Here's the problem with that is how do we not kill the land with our pleonexia, which is a great Greek word for always wanting more and more and more. Why this, not more? We were talking about
can't.
that earlier.
We can.
That's so high, but we have to. I don't like it. I don't like. We can't.
We can't, because you know what?
No, I don't like that. We have to find a way.
Well, let me-
Otherwise, we're gonna become Dune.
Let me tell.
I-
In fact, it's a very good. It's a very good point. Okay. If you are an IT guy today, you're flying high. Yet the guys that produce your food are basically modern day slaves. Half of them have no papers. Half of them live beyond a level of poverty that we can imagine. I mean, the third world is right here.
Mm-hmm.
So being a farmer today, which means to work your land, get this resource to renew every single year, is not rewarded at all. But the most ecologically destructive things are the most rewarded financially. So guess what?
Oil.
We were talking about wealth.
Mhm.
No, it's consumption, it's creation of material things. Oil is, look, we need energy. Okay, so there is a direct correlation between energy and poverty. Cheap energy allowed the poverty to fall.
Mm-hmm.
We're living amazing times because of cheap energy. Well, oil is cheap energy. It comes with consequences. One day we'll have alternative, but today if we stop oil, we don't have an economy, we don't have a civilization. It just stops right here.
But is there an alternative? Like,
There is an alternative.
What's
There are many alternatives.
Like what?
Wind, solar,
Wind
less
kills
consumption.
thousands upon thousands of birds and bats a year.
A co-
Solar takes tons of silica to be mined to create, and huge land use.
There is a combination. There is not one solution. It's a combination of many, many solutions. But the number one solution is consumption. Why do you need a 10,000 square foot house? Why do you need 5 cars? Look, I should be speaking. I should be speaking.
And no, this is a problem.
But that's, by the way, your generation is tackling with this is a sharing economy. We have limited resources. We're going to share those resources. So we're
Mhm.
going to go towards a future where I'm telling you, communism and capitalism are going to be very, very. There is not one system that succeeds.
No.
We need to have a system where all farmers, in fact, the farmers should tell us what to do at this particular point. The president of the United States should be a farmer. Because look at those guys. By the way, amazing things. You want to talk about consumption. Driving through here, there is a Christmas tree farm. I had once a client who was a Christmas tree farmer. And I remember it was Covina. I drove there. I had my $500 station wagon, and we meet and we talk, and he was showing me his land, and it takes 7 years to get that farm to be mature. So you have to do a 7-year investment before you have your first harvest, and then you keep rolling over 7 years, right? And we're talking about this and how amazing the prospect of selling his trees was. And I've been observing this Christmas tree farm here, and guess what? They're not renewing the land. He didn't plant, and I've been here for 2.5 years, he didn't plant the other lots. They planted weed, hemp. Because guess what? They just want the fast buck. So the guy that was planting those trees, if you go back to downtown Bend, you will see you have mature trees. He's going to cut his farm and he's going to plant hemp. Nobody gives a shit. They're doing the short-term thing. whatever sells for today's profit. The real farmers, they are thinking generationally, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. To save the world, it needs to be run by farmers. That's right.
But what if, so what kind of farmers though? Because the generational ones, are you pointing more towards a vegetarian future, or do you think meat consumption is okay?
No, I'm not. I'm not talking. We're not having this conversation about meat or no meat. I'm talking about farming, because you know what? Like a farm needs amount of working animals. You know, it's kind of a cycle. So you can't just grow cow. You have to grow corn, and it's a process. The farmer's mentality. Mm-hmm. The market will dictate. I mean, look, a big milk manufacturer went bankrupt. In fact, the largest went bankrupt this year. All it takes is people to change their minds and stop consuming, and the market will adjust. So at the moment, everybody complains about the environment, but everybody consumes like mad. They're throwing these bottles of water. There's plastic everywhere.
Yeah.
They have those toys with these belts, these batteries, everything. You can't go to the
using
restaurant.
energy, using lights. I mean, all that stuff. It all affects. Where do you think it comes from?
That's right.
Like this fast fashion that's taking off, where people need to have new outfits every week.
There you go.
It's creating huge, like, people say, oh, I take it to Goodwill. I take my extra clothes there. Goodwill ships that stuff out to Africa because they have too much of it.
Well, actually, most of it ends up in landfill. Most of it is produced by little kids.
Oh, the stuff that goes to Africa, by the way, they all don't wear it either. They burn it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like, it's a holistic solution. It comes from philosophy. It comes from, the problem is, how do you tell people they should not have or consume where success is measured by the way you can consume? That goes back to the rich or wealthy. We correlate wealth to money. Well, wealth is not money. Wealth is to be able to go into wildland, put a blanket on the floor and have an amazing picnic in a wild environment. But nope, you have this wild environment, amazing landscape, and people are thinking, oh, what an amazing experience. Let's build a condo. Next thing you know, you go with your blanket on a cement floor surrounded by properties that decided that the wild land that was amazingly wild is now worth great riches, but the wealth of the experience is gone. Yeah. So it's a mind shift.
That reminds me of a story. I took a friend out, a very popular hike here in Bend is Green Lakes. And so I took a couple of my friends out there about 3-4 years ago, and we hiked out, and they were just amazed by how beautiful it is. Have you been there, Green Lakes? You have to check it out. It's absolutely beautiful. It's at the base of It's at the base of South Sister and Broken Top, and there's you're in the middle of these mountains, 2 beautiful lakes, an island, and you're just like, there's no way you can look without being amazed. No, there's no direction. And my friend, who's from Southern California, he looks around and he's like, it would be great. This is so awesome. It would be perfect. It's just a little cabin right there.
There you go.
And I just go, fuck that.
That's right.
He's like, what are you talking? It would be great. We said, oh yeah? And then we need a road to get there. And then we're going to have other people, they're going to want to build cabins. Then we're going to need a restaurant for the cabins. And we're going to need a gas station to get our cars back out and back in. And then we'll need a market. And then it'll be in neighborhoods. And then we'll need a McDonald's because we're going to get sick of the own food we're bringing in, and we got to have McDonald's. And he's like, oh, okay, I guess. But it was a bit of an argument until I started going down there. He's like, just one. It won't be. I was like, that's how it starts. It starts with one.
That's right. Yeah, it's very disturbing right now to see that, consumption has gone absolutely nuts. I mean, obviously, there's a generational thing. My parents didn't consume as much. I didn't consume as much. You guys consume way more. I mean, it's just gone crazy. Single-use things. I mean,
They're going through a phone in a freaking half a year to a year,
Yeah.
$1,000 thing.
Gives good investment opportunities, though.
Sure. So we can have more stuff.
That's right.
So it's just like, okay, so I think that I went deep on this issue myself mentally not too long ago. I was just like, well, how do we do this energy crisis thing? And the reason I went deep on this is we got a huge deal with a company that wants us to help them with changing people's perceptions on dams to be more pro-dam. And the environmentalist in me is just like, oh, well, the thing is that, the fish and the this and the that. And then I was just like, well, where does Oregon get their energy from? And I ended up looking up a graph, and 47% of our energy comes from hydroelectric dams. After that's 38% comes from coal, 17% from natural gas, 5% from nuclear, and the rest are little blips of wind and whatnot. So if you're like, okay, get rid of the dams, then we're burning coal. Burning more of it, and that's where we're getting our stuff from. Or we're doing natural gas.
There's an incredible investment opportunity here. From an investment perspective, I mean, trillions of dollars will be spent in renewable.
Which hydroelectric is renewable. It's water going through a dam, and it creates a carbon free.
That's correct.
So I'm looking at, like, yes, you have these cons with dams, but the only way to solve this, but the only way that I realize to solve this problem that people are up in arms on, you want to solve the energy problem? Stop using electricity.
Pretty much.
Become a Native American. They are the ones that had to figure it out.
Well, what happens is it's consumption.
Exactly.
We are utilizing way more resources than we actually need. So,
well, what do we really need besides food, water, and shelter?
Well,
electricity isn't something that we need.
Age will tell you this.
We want it.
That's the wealth concept. As I go back, to see my children grow, and now that I have grandchildren, to see them grow, you realize what we really need is, hey, bud, it's 5. Let's go have a nice drink and a nice table, a beautiful meal, or like what we did the other day, we cooked together. Mm-hmm. Wasn't this amazing?
Yep.
I was making the margaritas, you were making the guacamole, we both were making the
awesome mushroom tacos.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
We had a great time.
Yeah.
Give me one restaurant where we could have that experience. None.
No.
That was cheap. We used no resources. We didn't drive anywhere. We had a great time. That's wealth right there. So we don't need so much, but if you want to go to a restaurant and every time they take your plate has to be washed, the plate is about that big now. It used to be here. Now the bigs are like that big.
Yeah.
Well, that's energy because we have to manufacture that plate. We have to carry that plate. We have to wash that.
And all the detergents and everything, it goes into our rivers, which then goes in the ocean.
Never ends.
No.
However, look at it this way. Look at it the bright side. The bright side is there is no black and white. The bright side is you have what you have. There are opportunities to coal because we need coal for industries. You can't make steel without coal. We need oil. We need renewables. We need all of the things that we currently have.
Mm-hmm.
But what we need is the desire to change and the desire to actually think like a farmer, which means to actually utilize our resources in a way that it will be available for generations to come. And when that mindset changes, which means that we're actually willing to consume less, have smaller things, at that point, things will change and will change very rapidly. And what happens is a lot of money will be made because we're going to have in 50 years new industries that don't exist today, and people are not going to be working in certain industries that exist today. Well, I think I got confused here. But anyway, you get the gist. The gist is as soon as we're ready to transform, we will transform. Will it be too late? Perhaps it might be too late for a few polar bears and some ice. Because, I flew over the Greenland and I've seen, I flew over one day, it was like minus 50. And then, my wife and I flew back and there was nothing. It was 35 degrees Celsius. We're talking about an 85-degree differential. Nothing. There was no ice. Zero ice, zero.
Really?
So it's happening. It's there. It might be too late for this, but okay, let's try to rebuild for future generations. Maybe we can rebuild this. Maybe we can cool it down one day if we plant enough trees.
Mm-hmm.
It's like every time you go wash your hands, you're taking like half a rim of paper, you're taking paper plates. So, the problems become incredible investment opportunities, by the way. Problems are opportunities from a financial perspective. So we got to get the greed, financial opportunity, and also the scare tactic, which is what, what's happening right now, is, it's the end of the world. Well, okay. It might be the end of the world. Everybody needs to change their tune and consume a lot less.
No. People say that you should change your tune. They don't say that they don't lead by example. That's the problem.
Well, in America, we consume way too much.
Yeah.
And if everybody wants to be like us, I mean, we're doomed.
Well, no, it's just the people in America, they'll get on a soapbox and say that you need to change. I'm going to still drive my car and fly my planes and wash my hands and things like that. Well, no, I mean, I fly a plane too. It's fine. It is what it is. I'm not just talking about flying like this. I'm not talking like when you get into a commercial plane and you fly places.
That's right.
Which happens
all the time.
I don't know. All the time. It's unreal. Like you look at a map of the U.S. and all the flights that go over it and
That's
just a little line. You
yeah.
can't see the country
That's
by the
right.
time it's done on a day because of all the lines that went everywhere.
That's right.
Country's covered. So when people go down this train, I'm like, okay, well, change starts with your wallet.
It does.
That's how the organic movement happened. So that's the problem. And so when you said it can't happen, unfortunately, I somewhat agree with you, but I'd like to at least think that there's a possibility. But
What do you mean can't happen?
Can't happen, meaning to stop consumption, to stop energy use.
Well, no, it can happen radically today. It has to happen over time. You cannot just turn on a switch and then all of a sudden nobody consumes, because you have an entire civilization based on consumption. I mean, you have to rethink and reinvent the whole thing, opportunities, but also massive issues.
Mm-hmm.
But big opportunities nonetheless.
Okay, so I want to take the conversation really quick back into analogies. I was thinking one thing when we were talking about flying.
Oh yeah, I love those.
Yes. One thing that I've learned, and I would like to get your next one, is checklists and flying. Really hit home to me when I was learning that, and still do it today. And it's this concept that a lot of people probably wouldn't understand because so few people do it, where you just have all these things on a laminated piece of paper that you need to go through one by one. And even though you've done this 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times being flying this plane, you still go through and check every little thing. How are the ailerons doing, oil, everything before you get in the plane and you fly off. And that's to make sure that if a problem happens, you're doing it on the ground instead of in the air where bad things can be happening. And that's basically a process. And I've taken that idea and I've brought it into business of like, always have a process, always have a checklist. And it allows for human error of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Complacency. If you're able to take your business and put checklists into it, then and processes into it, then it's not a human error, it's your processes error.
That's right.
And you're able to go through and change that. And it all came from basically flying and not being like, oh, it's this person, Like, no, it's a process. It also allows me not to be mad at people because I'm like, there's probably something wrong with the process we put in place, and that's why this happened. And there is.
Yeah.
So what other, first, I don't know, on that one or other analogies, I'm sure, because we talk about it all the time, that you find when it comes to business and flying?
Well, first of all, everything is done on the ground. The thing is sitting right here in the hangar. Nothing happens if you play with the buttons or try to figure things out right here on the ground. So you're on the ground, just go around, make sure, if you want to play with the buttons, see what happens. Plug it in, play with all the electronics, see what happens. On the ground. Get fluent in it on the ground. Okay. So then you commit to going flying. So you played on the ground with everything. You kind of got a feel for the machine on the ground. And you have a certain fluency of the system, which are very complex. Navigation, engine monitoring, all of these things that you need to really understand. Because you don't have time to figure it up in the air. Next comes the planning phase. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you are not taking off, or at least I am not. And that's why I don't go fly with other pilots. As you know, I don't go fly with my friends. I just do my thing because I have a certain way to do things, which is I do everything on the ground. Before I go fly, even if it's to go around the patch, I have put my destination airport. I have an alternate airport. Even if I just go around to go to the aviation museum at Madras, I have a Madras in there. I have my backup, coming back to Ben. I have Redmond in the box. So God forbid something happens, in the box as a visual cue, I know where I'm going. Mm-hmm. and you do everything on the ground, then you go and you fly. If something happens in the air, which it does, you have your plan, you are fluent with the systems on the ground. Something that you have to know by heart in terms of emergencies are like two or three things. Usually you have to shut down an engine or something, but the rest is, if it's not what you've seen on the ground or what you have planned, get your checklist. And you go through the whole thing, and there in your list, you will see, oh, okay, I forgot to do this, or something has happened, or low oil pressure mean this. And you don't panic because it's on the checklist. You didn't lose an engine, you keep flying.
Sure.
So you're having a little bit of a hiccup, or it might be that what can happen is you have bad weather out of your control. But if you run out of fuel, you're your problem. You hit a bird in the air, out of your control, but again, you had a plan, so you hit the bird, something bad happened to the plane, but at least you know where you're going. So the reality of the matter in terms of business is you do everything on the ground, you fly the mission. If there is a hiccup, you pick up the checklist, but you're not changing destination. You should already know, in case of an emergency, I want to go there. If you go in the air, in fact, look at the accidents flying. Every time, 2.5 miles from the airport, everybody's dead. You know why? Because they did not have a plan. So they're going back to wherever they came from.
2.5 miles?
Yeah, 2 to 5 miles from the runway. People usually crash.
Really?
When I take off in this, if I have a problem in my box, I have Portland. Why? 2 runways, 10,000 feet, ILS, and you know what else? There is a restaurant, and there is a bar that serves great margaritas.
Yeah.
So if I have a problem with this, I am not trying to make it back here. I'm going to go to Portland, where I know a great mechanic is. Very long runway. I'm not going to have to force it. I'm not going to try. It's the same in business. Everything on the ground, you go fly the mission, but as you're flying, you're going to encounter all kinds of crazy wild things. If you took off and you didn't know what your emergency airport should be and what your final destination is, you're going nowhere. And you might be going for a while, but there's that one fatal day. So for a business to thrive, or for you as a business person to thrive, you have to systematically stick to a set of rules, and that's your checklist.
So basically, making sure that you have a plan and where you're going to end up going in business. What happens if this client doesn't come through? Where am I going to get funding? What if all this falls, maybe backup lines of credit, things of that nature? Like, what if things don't go according to plan? Because they always don't. Nothing goes according to plan. No,
that's not true. Everything goes according to plan, because in your planning, you should provision.
Going according to the plan of your backup plans. Okay.
Well, sometimes you go into a transaction and there's no backup, especially early in your career. You're going and it's all or none. You might fail. It might be the end of it just might be the end of your career. You can't afford to eat. So that's a possibility. The possibility is you start something and look, you're starting the hot sauce, right? Well, it might or might not work, but it's okay because you have food that you can put on the table. But the failure of the business is not an obstacle. It's just a possibility.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were just starting the hot sauce at this particular moment without Mazama Media, it would be a very different approach.
I would be putting a lot more time into it, that's for sure.
But you would be flying with no net. But you would have made a conscious decision. I'm taking off. I might not make it back.
I'm okay with that, though.
Sometimes it's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay when you're alone.
Because I believe, I do it alone, but I believe in, I don't have a family or anything like that. Or if your spouse is okay with it as well, or your partner, or what have you, it's okay. But these are the analogies to flying. Is you gotta. It's so much easier on the ground, man. You can figure it out. Like the freezing thing that I had. The plane, 4 days in Napa. It's raining like hell. Everything is nice.
went around the plane twice because I knew it was, lots of water everywhere, double checked, put my wife in the back, turn on the engine, lots of wind, like 35 knot wind. So it was very windy that day. So anyway, takeoff, rough takeoff, blah, blah, blah. We're climbing. Something is just not, I'm flying, but something is just not 100%. But I'm flying, everything is well, the engine temperatures are great, everything is looking good. All of a sudden, I'm getting this error message on my thing. I'm still flying, I'm not touching anything, the plane is flying. So let me just go to flight level and see what happens. Well, what happened is water accumulated in the tail. And a lot of water accumulated in the tail. And as I was taking off, there was a cold front coming in and it froze very quickly. It didn't have time to drain. And it froze the actuator for the trim tab. Long story short, the trim tab is what killed everybody on the air front stab because, that was the autopilot. The trim tab can put your plane into a position where you cannot have the force to control your airplane because it's designed to actually help you with this. So it's really an issue. Disconnect the autopilot, check it's flying okay, re-engage the autopilot, play with this, disengage, get the checklist. And sure enough, there was a thing saying, it's definitely a trim issue. So I'm like flying and I'm just, so I it says trim, so I forced the wheel super hard, but good enough that I could re-engage the autopilot. I re-engaged the autopilot. The checklist say, well, there is nothing else that the checklist says. So, okay, I did what the checklist says. I'm ready to disengage the autopilot. We're flying. We made it safe here. I'm in the hangar. I heated up the hangar, and I realized that the trim wheel was working well. Nobody died. So we had
that's good.
Yeah, we had a contingency. There was definitely a little bit of an issue. But every time we take off, we know there might be an issue. Get your checklist out. It looks like the checklist ends right here. Well, don't overthink it. A lot of people overthink the thing. You think on the ground, don't overthink in the air.
Great analogy. Well, Youri, I appreciate you allowing us to shoot this episode here in your beautiful hangar. This is a freaking treat. I love it. Love looking around. Love chatting with you, learning from you, and I really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.